Hi, I'm extremely sorry. I got a personal situation here I have to attend. Uh, I'm very sorry for that. Okay, I will just get started. I was talking about the problem statement. The first is about the limited awareness of Pega specific security configurations. I think I briefly already talked about that. Like most of the time, when Pega developers they do some kind of development, what I find based on my experience is security is given a kind of a least priority. I will not criticize the developer, but that's what I've seen. Like when you start with the POC, when you start building an applications, you always consider that okay, let's take care of security at the very end, right? So there is some kind of knowledge gap, I would say, or at least the certified senior system architects they miss some kind of security configurations. Also, Pega being a low code, there are a lot of places where you can do a minimal configuration. A very small configuration in a connect rest can have a significant impact on the integration security, right? That you will all acknowledge. The similarly, so this is one set of group for the developers. But if you also take a look on the penetration testers, so every organizations either they have their own penetration testers or they go to a different or like different organizations they also do service on the penetration testing. But when penetration testers, when they do some kind of penetration testing on the Pega applications, they really don't know what are the configurations within the Pega development environment, right? They may check some missing headers, they may do lot of testing especially on the integrations or other area, but not on the application layer area. So there is a certain knowledge gap within the penetration testers. And then, I mean, if you talk about the quality testing, now all Pega testers they do understand Pega. They can easily create their test cases based on how Pega works, but this gap is there into the security area. The second is about the proactive security actions. So when I call proactive, again, I'm coming back to the penetration testers. Most of their findings are reported, and then those findings will be taken by the Pega product teams. They work on it, they fix those things. So this is more like a reactive thing. So let's say if a cybersecurity incident comes in, then we as Pega developer or the Pega teams, they fix those issues, right? So we wanted to solve that problem. We wanted to have some kind of proactive security actions taken. So that's how this SecOps Studio can help with those proactive actions. And the third is about DevSecOps policy. I briefly talked about where I played the role of DevOps in my previous project for 5 years. But then now if you look at everywhere, they talk about dev security operations. Security is also a main thing. And if you look at the Pega studios, we have the dev studio, we have the app studio, we have the admin studio and prediction studio. But we thought, why don't we have some studio for security where we can do all the security operations? Not only doing the operations, but also checking or getting an one-stop overview where we can get like how our applications security is configured. So, and this is one. And the second is like when we do the development, now we have something called security checklist. But if you look carefully, security checklist is nothing but like someone is doing some checks, like the LSA do some checks and make sure that security checklist is done. And this security checklist can be integrated into the Pega deployment manager. But with this SecOps Studio is more like an extension to this security checklist. So here in this studio, not only you get some report and you can get an overview, but also we do the integration during the development part, during the CI part. So we make an API call, we make sure there is no vulnerability is there, and there are a lot more which I will also share you in the live demo. So the main problem statements which we wanted to solve with SecOps Studio is mainly on the security side, how we are going to address the security misconfigurations, how we are going to be more proactive, and also do the DevSecOps policy or implement it during the time of deployment. And so now what are the features within the SecOps Studio? Again, it's not just a vulnerability scan. If you take any kind of penetration testers, they will have some suite of products that can help with their penetration testing, right? And this SecOps Studio can complement. It's not going to definitely replace the penetration testers or their tools, but it can complement the existing penetration testing tools. So this is not only just the vulnerability scan, but it can do different features like PAI deductions, like authentication checks, like encryption checks. whatever configurations you can do it in Pega, that can be configured, not configured, that can be monitored and managed within the SecOps Studio. Okay, now let me talk about the architecture before I go to the demo. Now, okay, the architecture, the SecOps Studio, again, I already mentioned that it's just another studio. So for sure, it needs to be imported into our Pega environment. So in every environment like dev, testing, production, in every environment, you need to have this SecOps Studio installed, and that can scan or interface with your database. Like it can scan, and yeah, easily it can go to the rule base or database and then get all the details. So those will be there. And then the other integrations are, one, we also did an AI powered thing. So it can choose two options, either use Pega NLP or it can also use the Gen AI thing. So we facilitated in such a way that it can easily integrate with Pega Gen AI, or customers can bring their own Gen AI models, the foundation models. SecOps Studio can integrate, and there are certain features that are AI powered. And the second, the interesting thing is about the code scan API. So what we did here is we built a Python API, like a Python project where it has a Flask API. So Pega can connect to the Python project using an API call. And this Python, what it does, it has a library, it uses YAML files. So whatever test the penetration testers do, right, they can use that, they can import their YAML files or their configurations or their test into this Python project, and we make API call. Let the good use case is when we do some kind of development, when we use some kind of Java method, there are a lot of chances that the security configuration, like the vulnerability, can be there into the Java code, right? Pega do have static content analyzer, and if you look carefully, it uses some kind of regis functions and it tries to check, but this is more like an extension to that. Like you can maintain your own vulnerability scan, like penetration testers can help with that. And this Python project can be deployed on premise, it can be deployed into cloud as well. So Pega as an application, it can connect, make an API call. During the check-in time, we can do an API call and then get the results. And how we proceed further is we also add some guardrail warning if there is any kind of vulnerability found. So this is the architecture behind, very simple architecture. Most of the code which we build is within the Pega rule. It's a studio, but then we also make possible like the integrations, like it can connect to AI system, and then it can also use some kind of code scan API. Okay, now it's done. Now let's go to demo. I'm going to share the SecOps Studio. I will do a quick screen share. So this is the SecOps Studio which we were building from last December. So this SecOps Studio, it exactly perfectly fits in along the other studios. And let me go through different features. There are different tests, different scans. So I'm going to go through some of the important scans. Let me start with authentication. So this is something which is main. The first is about the service API authentication. So here I want to just make a quick statement. Like SecOps Studio is not just like a reporting tool. I know there are a lot of configurations which we do in Pega rules. So if we want to get an overview, we have to write some query and get it and show it in a more 360 view kind of thing. But then it can also do some kind of other checks. Okay, service API authentication. You guys can easily recognize this. Like we can build different types of service APIs like connect rest, connect soap, and those will be part of service package. And that is the place where we do the authentication. And this will list you. So you can select an application and then get a list of get an overview of all your services and how these authentication are configured. So we created or we categorize it into 4 categories. But then, for example, let's look at this service REST. It uses basic authentication. So basic authentication, of course, is high risk. And I've also seen in projects where there were no authentication used, but very limited kind of services. So if you in your project, if they are using no authentication, maybe they introduce some kind of authentication layer at the top level, like at the API gateway or somewhere, but still that is a huge risk. But this, what it benefits, what SecOps Studio adds it, in a single overview, you can get a complete overview of all your services per application. So this is just a simple thing. You can easily understand this. Similarly for connector authentication, and SecOps Studio is also built in such a way that we don't overload your web node. So it also uses a lot of background processing. We use our own queue processor, and connector we use a queue processor. Why we made the decision? Because in connector you may use some dynamic referencing, and that should come under the application context, right? So we use queue processor, little bit technical details. So we use queue processor and then try to get the details based on the application. And here also you can do a scan. And connector again, like, we send our data, but the external, we connect to external system. But still, if there is no kind of authentication profile, if external system, if they don't have any kind of authentication profile, then it can be also a huge risk, right? Because you connect to that and someone can eavesdrop the data. So these two are kind of basic. And then developer authorization, where we also check, again, these are all kind of reporting, how much checkout enable, who has the portal access, how the granular access is controlled. Let me go to the sign on. So what the sign on gives you is, like, if there are any kind of attacks detected into your system. Let's say if your application is exposed to the internet, there are a lot of chances that people can inject different things into your login page. So this will give an overview if there is any kind of attacks detected. Like, let's take an example of this one. For now, for this demo purpose, I made the count as only 4. But in real time, like, the attackers, they may try, like, different types of combination. They try to get into your system. And if there is any kind of vulnerability, like the web login page, if you have customized little bit, and then if there is a vulnerability, definitely there are chances that people can make use of it, get inside, and it can be a cyber security incident. And this will give you a list of all the possible attacks that were happened into your environment. And timeouts, yeah, timeouts, why timeouts is kind of important? Because, like, let's say if you have a connector, and if the connector timeout, if you have it more than 30 seconds, there are chances that it can possess some security risk. Like DDoS attacks can be possible. If people know the connector endpoint, they can just keep hitting your endpoint and keep your server busy. So as a best practice, is also good to have 30 as the seconds for the connector. So this goes on, like, we capture every small minimal configurations and give you the list here. The next is about the password, where, yeah, we can also scan if people are using common password. Okay, now let's say, like, there is a hacker, like, someone want to get into a Pega application. Normally, like any application, if you take, they will have some kind of password combinations which they will try. And they try it like, around passwords, around test, or different things, right? Now let's say if I want to hack into a Pega application, I will definitely try out around some kind of common passwords. I think everyone recognize those 5-letter words which we use for all the rules. But, like, people can easily, because I mean, again, with my experience, and everyone can acknowledge that, like, most of the people, they said passwords around those letters, like 1 2 3, have some different letters are there. So what we did is we created a CSV file with a common list of passwords. And then we can also scan it, like, go for all the basic username. Because now you may have a question like, okay, we are using SSO, we don't have any basic authentication. It's not the case, because when you install Pega, you get a lot of basic operators. Pega by default also disable it, but there are chances that those operators may be enabled. Or for any kind of other purpose, like, people also do create basic operators, and if their password is bit less secure, then again there are high chances that people can also use some default passwords or try to brute force and get into. So this will give you a list where you can also force password change. And then, yeah, next time when they log in, definitely they have to do the password change. But this gives you an overview, not only the new operator, but also it checks the out of the box operators. And small things, like, for example, if you create some password, let's take this example. I created something called common password, and the property type is text. What is the risk here? Like, this property may hold some kind of sensitive data, right? Password kind of data. And ideally, this property type should be of password. Again, this gives you an overview. Maybe a lot of false positives, maybe, okay, this is meant to be on a text one, but there are chances that when you have sensitive data and you may need to correct it, you may need to change the property type. This gives an overview for the application. And then the password strength, API key storage, where are we storing the, where are we sourcing the API key storage. So all these comes under the password. And under the encryption, so we look into how this encryption are configured, like what is the system key, what is the custom managed key, do you use any kind of encryption. So this is just an overview. And then we also look into how this data is configured in rest, as well as how the data is configured in motion, like are we using HTTP protocol. Like if you have some private connectivity, some people directly hit their URL and use their HTTP URL, as well as the TLS version. At least you should have 1.2, greater than 1.2, right? This gives an overview. Again, per application you can also check, and this will be executed at the back end. Next is on the app config. App config, the first thing is about the missing HTTP headers. This, I believe, all the penetration testers also will be doing the testing, like what type of headers are kind of mandatory HTTP headers, that is, that can avoid some kind of cyber security risk. And we identified these seven headers which needs to be there. And then Pega also do support some kind of custom headers which you can add. And if you don't have these headers, it's good that to safeguard your applications, it's kind of mandatory that you have to add these custom headers. And content security policy, this will give you an overview of what type of content security policy is configured per application, right? So content security policy is not just, again, I will give you an incident, not an incident, like when I talk with the penetration testers, what they do is they just click the Pega URL and then they check the content security policy and they say, okay, you are good. But the content security policy, how we configure is based on the application, right? So every applications, it has its own configuration on the content security policy. It allows certain scripts. Sometimes if you use default allow all, it's kind of a risk because it can possess a lot of injection risk. But there are other risks as well, and this gives an overview of all the content security policy. Similarly for car settings. And then for file uploads, we are also kind of building something. We will go live with the next version of SecOps Studio, where we also add few more features. Like why I mentioned that is, like for file upload, we get to know where the documents are stored. Ideally, documents are meant to be stored into the file storage, not into the database. So that's a kind of a best practice. It's not a security risk, but that's a kind of a best practice. And here we can check if there is any kind of virus scanning enabled. If you are in Pega Cloud, then you are safe. Like you don't want to do this action like customizing the call virus check. But then if you are on premise, then it's our responsibility, or like if you are there, your responsibility to take care of doing the virus checks whenever you do the document upload. And similarly for the attachment categories, you can find it per application. And what we are also currently looking into is like how to restrict a file type based on the application as well. And then this is about environment data compliance, where we check there are situations where you need to import a production data into a lower environment, right? Maybe you import only one environment and then clean it. I'm just giving a worst case scenario. There were situations where you might have done it, but then this will give you a list, like do we really have such data, like environment compliance data coming in from the higher environment. This gives you like which table, how many instances, and all this overview it's going to give here. And then the security DSS. So security DSS is like here we list down. So this is sourced from Pega documentation, like all the security DSS which can strengthen your security, like with the small DSS settings. But then we also look into what is the actual value it is configured for your environment, and is it really secured enough, because Pega has its own recommendation what needs to be what value should be there to secure it. So this gives an overview of all the security DSS as well. And log file, for log file, normally when you go to Dev Studio and then if you try to download if you try to download a log file, it should prompt for an authentication. That is kind of a expect, like that should be an expected thing. But if you disable it and if you allow for everyone, that's again another security risk, like anyone can download their log files. So this gives an overview, like if there is any kind of, if it is like if it is really secured enough, like anyone can download the log file or not. And I like to mention this as well, like in every future we also have some kind of recommendations which we are continue building in. So still it is not there for all the futures, but we also like to give you a picture what needs to be done. Because the second part is like we are creating some documentation how to use this SecOps Studio, but then there will be some important or critical thing which will also be embedded into the UI. So that's what you see here, and here you will have some recommendations. And for most of the features, you will already see the recommendations, but we keep building it. And PAA scan. So PAA scan, this is where we use some Pega. I mean, we have an option to use Pega NLP, as well as we do use some AI here. So here we can do a scan of sensitive data. So it can be like a customer name, it can be like a bank account number. There are chances like people, developers can do their development, they do some log message, and there are situations people can push those log message. Like if you, let's say for example, if you have a different monitoring solution, and if you push your sensitive data into your log file on an auditing side, and it's also kind of a security risk, right? You cannot push your PAI data into a logs or something. So this will give you a scan, and then yeah, so this will list you what type of PAI data you have, what type of entity it corresponds to. You can scan for all Pega rules, alerts, and security file. So you can upload a new log file, but only limitation is you should be using CSV, because it is processed by using a data flow. So you just need to save us into a CSV file, and then we take care of processing that at the back end using a data flow. So this is for PAA scan. And for the database scan, we also check if you have some kind of sensitive data stored into your database columns. Again, there can be a lot of false positives. Not really everything is sensitive, right? Maybe there are chances that customer, like if you have some bank account number or some critical thing, you have to definitely either mask it or push it to the blob. But then this is just going to give you an overview. You can take a look and then decide if you really want to take actions or not. Yeah, so this is log and code scan. Currently we are also working on yeah, at least minimum it just look into your code and try to see if you are pushing any kind of sensitive data into your log message steps, or different ways to log. And security guardrails. Okay, now we talked about different things, like how can help, how it can give you a report. But the important thing is like we should also take some steps to prevent it during the time of development. So we introduce some more guardrails. Pega do have a lot of guardrails, and they also have a category on security, but we enrich that category with our own custom guardrail warnings, which can also help during the application development. So here you get a list of the rules which has the security risk, but then during the development it can be more useful, like when you do a branch merge, when you do a check-in rule, then we use the custom warnings, and there we also introduce some new warnings. And the final is about OAuth top 10. Still we are in 2021 because that's the latest version. And here we do different checks. Like one is broken access control, where we check if you have any kind of security 0019 alerts. You can upload your log file and then get an overview of your back related issue. And here maybe this is the interesting one, where we also do some injection checks. So this is where I was talking about an Python project, right? The architecture where we connect to a Python project, where we can also do some kind of vulnerability scan. And this facilitate that, like whenever people do a rule check-in, then we make an API call, we do the scanning, and then we also check if there is any vulnerability found. And that is actually part of this OAuth A03, the injection one. And from here you get a report. Again, this is from dev, because from the SecOps Studio we also don't want to give more options to change some rule or something. That's how the admin studio is also built, right? From admin studio you can update some data configurations, with little minimal configurations you can do. Similarly with SecOps Studio, you can update, like you can ask an operator to do a force password change or do some minimal configurations, but we don't want to touch these rules which are kind of locked. Like if people want to deploy it, it should go to the dev studio. So this just gives an overview, if or it scans and gives you an overview. Again, this is kind of an extended version to the rule security analyzer tool. So if you look at rule security analyzer, it uses its own functions for it. So this is overall how we started with SecOps Studio. So initially the design also is more like create some user portal, and then we changed it. Let's make it as a studio because the main target audience, whom like the developers or the LSAs will be using it. So we changed the design to SecOps Studio. We started adding new features. We identified this should be the final category, and then under authentication we started adding one feature to it. And this is how it grew for the last 6 months. And yeah, so we are adding, still we have some stories in our backlog where we are our engineering team is contributing to it. uh, but maybe I'll take something a bit personally. Like it's been very difficult to take this to market. I tried with the Pega marketplace, but then the first step is like you need to be a Pega partner, and Minotech is a very lean company and we are not eligible to become a Pega partner. So we are trying different things, trying to see if we can collaborate with some partners, take this to Pega marketplace, because I find that is the right place, gives you a right exposure and give the credibility, right? People, when I talk about SecOps Studio, the first question I also get is like, is this in the Pega marketplace? For which I cannot take this. Okay, but I'm also working on this. Maybe I'll talk about one more thing, how we make this as kind of a product. So how we want to take this to the market is one, SecOps Studio as kind of a product, like we would like to install and implement into our into the clients. We'll also like to give a workshop, because personally I feel that is the strength, and how Minotech is going to grow is also on the enablement side. So I want to make a statement here, like we are not just going to create products from now on, we will also concentrate on the enablement. For the last 1 year there were no courses or materials, but something big is coming up. But then we wanted to apply some kind of services also to this product. It will be like an enablement program where we talk about security configuration, make everyone understand what those configurations are. And yeah, this is as a product. And the second is we are talking with couple of cybersecurity people, not people but a company within Netherlands, trying to make a collaboration and make this more as a service. Like we also take care of executing, like for 2 weeks or 3 weeks we execute some kind of penetration testing. So this SecOps Studio can help with the application layer, but then the penetration testers, they can take care of all these underground, like the infra layer or the platform level penetration testing. So this is how we see that SecOps Studio can be used in projects. Yeah, then we're almost at the end of this meeting, and really sorry for the pause in the middle. There were some problems in the home so the situation was not that great at the start, but then somehow it was managed, and now it's all good. And yeah, if you like it, please share your comments, share your feedback. You can just DM me, or if there is any sort of collaborations if you think of, we can definitely do that. And as I said, there is something big is coming on the enablement. I know a lot of my audience in the LinkedIn are people, Pega developer people, and they expect some content coming from me, and it will come very soon. So I'll end this session here. This is my very first live session. uh, yeah, I felt it went good apart from the starting few minutes, but I hope you find it valuable. Although this is more about the product, but I like to host a few more sessions in the coming weeks or months. That will be pure tech talk on, let's say, blueprint, constellation, or different topics. I'll see you in the next session. Thank you.